Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 6 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6. And we are in chapter 2. Chapter 2 is titled A Jamil Delivered by the Vishnu Dutas. And as we read yesterday, the Vishnu Dutas have just completely defeated the Yama Dutas by emphasizing the chanting of the holy names, particularly in the case of the Jamil. Anyway, let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swananiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatrulubhyascha kripa sindubhya eva cha Paditanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So yes, we are going on, devotees, to section 4, which is from verse 22 to verse 38. And we've titled that section, A Jamil Rejoices After His Deliverance. Verse 22 to verse 38, so let us read the verses. 22. Having been released from the nooses of Yamaraja's servants, the Brahminate Ajamil, now free from fear, came to his senses and immediately offered obeisances to the Vishnu Dutas by bowing his head at their lotus feet. He was extremely pleased by their presence, for he had seen them save his life from the hands of the servants of Yamaraj. And verse 23. O sinless Maharaj Parikshit, the order carriers of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Vishnu Dutas, saw that a Jamil was attempting to say something, and thus they suddenly disappeared from his presence. Wow. 24 to 25. After hearing the discourses between the Yama Dutas and the Vishnu Dutas, a Jamil could understand the religious principles that act under the 3 modes of material nature. These principles are mentioned in the 3 Vedas. He could also understand the transcendental religious principles which are above the modes of material nature and which concern the relationship between the living being and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Furthermore, a Jamil heard glorification of the name, fame, qualities, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He thus became a perfectly pure devotee. He could then remember his past sinful activities, which he greatly regretted having performed. Verse 26, a Jamil said, Alas, being a servant of my senses, how degraded I became. I fell down from my position as a duly qualified Brahmin and begot children in the womb of a prostitute. 27. Alas, all condemnation upon me. I acted so sinfully that I degraded my family tradition. Indeed, I gave up my chaste and beautiful young wife to have sexual intercourse with a fallen prostitute, accustomed to drinking wine. All condemnation upon me. 28. My father and mother were old and had no other son or friend to look after them. Because I did not take care of them, they lived with great difficulty. Alas, like an abominable lower-class man, I ungratefully left them in that condition. 29. It is now clear that as a consequence of such activities, a sinful person like me must be thrown into hellish conditions meant for those who have broken religious principles and must there suffer extreme miseries. Verse 30. Was this a dream I saw, or was it reality? I saw fearsome men with ropes in their hands coming to arrest me and drag me away. Where have they gone? 31. And where have those 4 liberated and very beautiful persons gone who released me from arrest and saved me from being dragged down to the hellish regions? 32. I am certainly most abominable and unfortunate to have merged in an ocean of sinful activities, but nevertheless, because of my previous spiritual activities, I could see those 4 exalted personalities who came to rescue me. Now I feel exceedingly happy because of their visit. 33. Were it not for my past devotional service, how could I, a most unclean keeper of a prostitute, have gotten an opportunity to chant the holy name of Vaikuntha Pati when I was just ready to die? Certainly, it could not have been possible. 34. Ajamil continued, I'm a shameless cheater who has killed his Brahminical culture. Indeed, I am sin personified. Where am I in comparison to the all-auspicious chanting of the holy name of Lord Narayan? 35. I am such a sinful person, but since I have now gotten this opportunity, I must completely control my mind, life, and senses, and always engage in devotional service, so that I may not fall again into the deep darkness and ignorance of material life. Verses 36 and 37. Because of identifying oneself with the body, one is subjected to desires for sense gratification, and thus one engages in many different types of pious and impious action. This is what constitutes material bondage. Now I shall disentangle myself from my material bondage, which has been caused by the Supreme Personality of Godhead's illusory energy in the form of a woman. Being a most fallen soul, I was victimized by the illusory energy and have become like a dancing dog led around by a woman's hand. Now I shall give up all lusty desires and free myself from this illusion. I shall become a merciful, well-wishing friend to all living entities and always absorb myself in Krishna consciousness. Verse 38. Simply because I chanted the holy name of the Lord in the association of devotees, my heart is now becoming purified. Therefore, I shall not fall victim again to the false lures of material sense gratification. Now that I've become fixed in the absolute truth, henceforward I shall not identify myself with the body. I shall give up the false conceptions of I and mine and fix my mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. Yes, so that's the end of that section. And Ajamil is really, he's just overwhelmed by his extreme good fortune. So let us go through the section again with the purports. Verse 22. Having been released from the nooses of Yamaraja's servants, the Brahmana Jamil, now free from fear, came to his senses and immediately offered obeisances to the Vishnu Dutas by bowing his head at their lotus feet. He was extremely pleased by their presence, for he had seen them save his life from the hands of the servants of Yamaraj. So yes, there's a short purport here from Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, Vaishnavas are also Vishnu Dutas, because they carry out the orders of Krishna. Duta generally means carrier. So Srila Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, Vaishnavas are also Vishnu Dutas because they carry out the orders of Krishna. Krishna is eager for the conditioned souls rotting here to surrender and be saved from material life and hell. So therefore the Vaishnavas try to bring the conditioned souls to their senses. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, those who are fortunate like a Jamil are saved by the Vishnu Dutas or Vaishnavas, and thus they return back home, back to Godhead. Verse 23. O sinless Maharaj Parikshit, the order carriers of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Vishnu Dutas, saw that a Jamil was attempting to say something, and thus they suddenly disappeared from his presence. So, purport. A verse is quoted from Shastra, doesn't say exactly where. Let me just read the purport, the translation. For persons who are papishta, very sinful, and durachar, misbehaved or very unclean in their habits, who are against the existence of God, who disrespect Vaishnavas and Brahmins, and who eat anything and everything, untimely death is sure. Yes, so Kali Yuga lifespan is maximum 100, very rare indeed, and it's decreasing. In South Africa, I'm not sure, but it's maybe around 50 or so. So, but anyway, now a Jamil is delivered from sinful reactions, so his lifetime is extended. Although he was meant to die just immediately. So, but when the Vishnu Dutas saw he wanted to say something, they disappeared. They wanted to give him a chance to glorify the Lord. Because now he's been freed from sinful reactions, he could glorify the Lord. Because unfortunately, unless you become free from sinful reactions, you're not really able to glorify the Lord. Yeah, this is confirmed by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 verse 28. I'll read the whole verse and translation. Yesham tvanta gatam papam, jananam punyakarmanam, te dvanva moha nirmukta, bhajante mam dridhavrata. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, and who are freed from the duality of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. So this is the standard, what Prabhupada's talking about here. This is Lord Krishna, of course, speaking, Bhagavad Gita 7:28. That you have to become freed from sinful actions and reactions. Sinful actions have to be completely eradicated. One has to become freed from the duality of delusion. And then you can engage nicely in devotional service. So the Vishnu Dutas made Ajamil aware of devotional service so he could immediately become fit to go back to Godhead. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, to increase his eagerness to glorify the Lord, they disappeared so that he would feel separation in their absence. In the mode of separation, glorification of the Lord is very intense. You know, I must admit, when I was reading through the verse itself about how he wanted to say, Ajamil wanted to say something, but then seeing that they decided to disappear, I thought, gosh, that's strange. But then I considered, well, actually, as Prabhupada said, they wanted him to glorify the Lord. I was thinking they didn't want him to glorify them for having delivered him. Yeah, but they wanted him to glorify the Lord and to really appreciate the Lord. So, okay, verses 24 and 25. After hearing the discourses between the Yamadutas and the Vishnu Dutas, Ajamil could understand the religious principles that act under the three modes of material nature. These principles are mentioned in the three Vedas. He could also understand the transcendental religious principles, which are above the modes of material nature and which concern the relationship between the living being and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Furthermore, Ajamil heard glorification of the name, fame, qualities and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He thus became a perfectly pure devotee. He could then remember his past sinful activities, which he greatly regretted having performed. Srila Prabhupada's purport. So in Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 45, Lord Krishna says, I won't read the Sanskrit but the translation, the Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjuna. Be transcendental to all of them. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. So anyway, the Vedas, they mainly deal with material things, the Vedic literatures, but they do give a gradual process for elevation. But the problem is if you really become attached to them and get sort of caught up in them and what they're recommending, then you can't be elevated to spiritual life. So Lord Krishna is advising Arjuna there to do devotional service because it's transcendental. And this is confirmed. Bhagavatam, Prabhupada points out 126, confirms devotional service as transcendental. Savaipum samparo dharmo, yato bhaktir adhoksaje. Bhakti, devotional service, is paro dharma, transcendental dharma. It is not material dharma. And of course, the majority of people think that religion is for material profit. Like the Christians say, give us this day our daily bread. And yeah, this is the general idea. But actually, everyone should be attached to paro dharma, transcendental dharma, religious principles by which you become a devotee. So that the Bhagavat religion, Bhagavat Dharma, teaches that the Lord and the living entity are eternally related and the living entity's duty is to surrender to the Lord. And when one is actually in devotional service, really engaged, then one is free from impediments and one becomes spiritually satisfied. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, having been elevated to that platform, Ajamil began to lament for his past materialistic activities and glorify the name, fame, form, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 26. Ajamil said, alas, being a servant of my senses, how degraded I became. I fell down from my position as a duly qualified Brahmin and begot children in the womb of a prostitute. Prabhupada makes the point, the general point is that men of higher class don't beget children in the wombs of lower class women. So therefore the custom is there in Vedic society to do horoscopes, to check suitability, compatibility. So Vedic astrology will show if they're born in Vipra Varna, in Brahminical Varna, or Kshatriya Varna, Vaishya Varna, or Sudra Varna, Varna Ashram. Yeah, in terms of the modes, the three modes, has to be examined. Otherwise, if the boy is a Brahmin, really of that nature, and the girl is a Sudra and is really of that nature, then the marriage will be miserable. It'll just fail. The boy has to marry a girl of the same category. Yeah. Or at the very most, a Brahmin boy might marry a Kshatriya girl, but that was not common. It happened, but it was not common. But not Vaishya and not Sudra. Yes. This is all material calculation, but ultimately if the boy and girl are devotees, still we have our experience with boys and girls of different natures. Oh, Krishna. Suffering and struggling because of lack of compatibility. But otherwise, it's a good start if they're both devotees. It's a very good start. If one is a devotee and the other isn't, well, Hare Krishna. It's not an auspicious sort of footing to get off to in a marriage. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, a devotee is transcendental, and therefore in a marriage between devotees, the boy and girl form a very happy combination. That's, as long as, these things are done carefully. Krishna. 27. Alas, all condemnation upon me. I acted so sinfully that I degraded my family tradition. Indeed, I gave up my chaste and beautiful young wife to have sexual intercourse with a fallen prostitute, accustomed to drinking wine. All condemnation upon me. I mean, it's one thing for the boy and the girl to have somewhat different natures, which, would not be surprising. I mean, it's unlikely they're going to be totally like the same. But if one is a Brahmin and the other is a drunkard and just a degraded, anyway, it's hopeless. So Prabhupada makes the point, and this is very nice, because Ajamil's condemning himself. Prabhupada says this is the mentality of one who's becoming a pure devotee. That what sort of fool and rascal was I, oh Krishna. But you saved me, my Lord. Prabhupada saved me. So when a person is elevated to devotional service by the Lord's mercy, spiritual master's mercy, first thing, he regrets his past sinful activities, and this helps him advance spiritually. So it's a duty, it just has to be done for a pure devotee, is to really understand what sort of nonsense background I've come from and to regret it. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, not only should one give up his past bad habits, but he must always regret his past sinful acts. This is the standard of pure devotion. And for example, we find that in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, on a number of occasions, expresses regret for a fallen condition. Yeah, great regret, extreme regret actually. Of course, he's transcendental, he's a great devotee, associate of the Supreme Lord, but still he feels like that. I'm lower than the worm and stool, he says. Anyone who simply hears my name becomes sinful. So there's a short purport here. Let's just read the whole thing. Oh no, sorry. I got to read verse 28. My father and mother were old and had no other son or friend to look after them. Because I did not care for them, they lived with great difficulty. Alas, like an abominable lower-class man, I ungratefully left them in that condition. So there's a very short purport here. Let me just read it. According to Vedic civilization, everyone has the responsibility for taking care of Brahmins, old men, women, children, and cows. This is the duty of everyone, especially an upper-class person. Because of his association with a prostitute, Ajamil abandoned all his duties. Regretting this, Ajamil now considered himself quite fallen. Verse 29. It is now clear that as a consequence of such activities, a sinful person like me must be thrown into hellish conditions, meant for those who have broken religious principles and must there suffer extreme miseries. 30. Well, there's no purport of 29. Was this a dream I saw, or was it a reality? I saw fearsome men with ropes in their hands coming to arrest me and take me away. Where have they gone? There's no purport here also. 31. And where have those 4 liberated and very beautiful persons gone who released me from arrest and saved me from being dragged down to the hellish regions? Yes, and again there's a very short purport. Let me just read it. As we have learned from the descriptions in the 5th canto, the hellish planets are situated in the lower portions of this universe. Therefore, they're called Ado Bhuva. Ajamil could understand that the Yamadutas had come from that region. 32. I am certainly most abominable and unfortunate to have merged in an ocean of sinful activities, but nevertheless, because of my previous spiritual activities, I could see those 4 exalted personalities who came to rescue me. Now I feel exceedingly happy because of their visit. Yes, so Prabhupada refers to Chaitanya Charitamrita, famous verse, Madhya Lila 22:54. Sadhu Sangha Sarva Shastre Koi, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha Sarva Siddhi Hoy. Association with devotees is recommended by all the Shastras, because by even a moment of such association, one can receive the seed for all perfection. So he mentions, Ajamil mentions in the verse, that he had been pious and performed spiritual activities. Yes. So in the beginning of his life, he was pure. He had associated with devotees and like that. And he's saying that because of that, he got some inspiration to chant the name, or to name his son Narayan. This was by the inspiration of the Lord in the heart. So the thing is, and Prabhupada makes this point, and this is just really important, if one has ever done some devotional service, the Lord never forgets him. So therefore the Lord in the heart gave Ajamil the opportunity to name his son Narayan, so he would chant that name regularly. Then he'd be saved from death. Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. By the mercy of the Guru and Krishna, one receives the seed of bhakti. And this association saves devotees from the greatest fear of taking birth in animal species. So Prabhupada makes the point that in ISKCON, we change the devotees' names so that they're reminded of the Lord. Then at the time of death, if one remembers one's name, spiritual name, Krishna Das, etc., then one will be saved from the greatest danger, which is, at the time of death, you'll take birth as an animal. So therefore, the change of name at the time of initiation is essential. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the Krishna consciousness movement is so meticulous that it gives one a good opportunity to remember Krishna somehow or other. Verse 33. Were it not for my past devotional service, how could I, a most unclean keeper of a prostitute, have gotten an opportunity to chant the holy name of Vaikuntapati when I was just ready to die? Certainly it could not have been possible. And again, a very short purport, I'll just read the whole thing. The name Vaikuntapati, which means the master of the spiritual world, is not different from the name Vaikunta. Ajamil, who is now a realized soul, could understand that because of his past sinful activities, because of his past spiritual activities in devotional service, he had gotten this opportunity to chant the holy name of Vaikuntapati in his horrible condition at the time of death. 34. Ajamil continued. I am a shameless cheater who has killed his Brahminical culture. Indeed, I am sin personified. Where am I in comparison to the all-auspicious chanting of the holy name of Lord Narayan? So, Prabhupada makes the point, and following on from what the points he was making just a few minutes ago, that the preachers in this Krishna consciousness movement must always consider what our position was before Krishna consciousness and what it is now. What change has taken place by this amazing mercy. So we, at least many of us, were meat eaters, drunkards, etc., etc. But now we've got the opportunity to chant Hare Krishna, and we must always appreciate that. And by the Lord's grace, we're opening centers. We must use this fortune to chant the holy names and serve the Lord. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, we must be conscious of the difference between our present and past conditions, and should always be very careful not to fall from the most exalted life. 35. I am such a sinful person, but since I have now gotten this opportunity, I must completely control my mind, life, and senses, and always engage in devotional service, so that I may not fall again into the deep darkness and ignorance of material life. And again, a short, very short purport, which I'll just read. It's only 2 sentences. Every one of us should have this determination. We've been elevated to an exalted position by the mercy of Krishna and the spiritual master. And if we remember that this is a great opportunity and pray to Krishna that we'll not fall again, our lives will be successful. Verses 36 and 37. Because of identifying oneself with the body, one is subjected to desires of sense gratification, and thus one engages in many different types of pious and impious action. This is what constitutes material bondage. Now I shall disentangle myself from my material bondage, which has been caused by the Supreme Personality of Godhead's illusory energy in the form of a woman. Being a most fallen soul, I was victimized by the illusory energy and have become like a dancing dog led around by a woman's hand. Now I shall give up all lusty desires and free myself from this illusion. I shall become a merciful, well-wishing friend to all living entities and always absorb myself in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada makes the point, this should be the determination of all Krishna conscious persons, to become free from Maya and to also be compassionate to those who are struggling in Maya, in her clutches. Because Krishna consciousness is not just for us, it's for others too. That is the perfection of Krishna consciousness, really, to give it to others. So someone who's interested just in their own salvation is not as advanced as one who feels compassion and therefore spreads Krishna consciousness. And such an advanced devotee will never fall down. Krishna will give special protection. And Prabhupada says, what a statement. That is the sum and substance of the Krishna consciousness movement. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, everyone is like a play toy in the hands of the illusory energy and is acting as she moves him. One should come to Krishna consciousness to release oneself and also to release others. Verse 38. Simply because I chanted the holy name of the Lord in the association of devotees, my heart is now becoming purified. Therefore I shall not fall victim again to the false lures of material sense gratification. Now that I've become fixed in the absolute truth, henceforward I shall not identify myself with the body. I shall give up false conceptions of I and mine and fix my mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. So Prabhupada makes the point that this verse explains how the living entity becomes the victim of the material condition. First step, misidentify with the body. Yes. Think you're something you're not. First step. And then base your life on that. Yeah. So therefore Bhagavad Gita begins by explaining that we're not these bodies, but we're the soul within. But to develop this consciousness and become focused and fixed like that, it's only possible if one chants Hare Krishna and keeps in the association of devotees. That's the secret of success. So therefore we stress chanting and keeping free from the contaminations of illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication and gambling. Right. Yes, well, at the time of initiation, devotees had to vow to follow those regulative principles and to chant 16 rounds minimum. And that's all that they vowed to do. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, with determination, one should vow to follow these principles and thus be saved from the miserable condition of material existence. The first necessity is to become freed from the bodily conception of life. So now the fifth section, verse 39 to 41, a Jamil goes to Haridwar and practices pure devotional service. So we will just read straight through, it's just 3 verses. 39. Because of a moment's association with devotees, the Vishnu Dutas, a Jamil detached himself from the material conception of life with determination. Thus freed from all material attraction, he immediately started for Haridwar. So Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, the word mukta sarvanu bandhana, from verse 39, indicates that after this incident, a Jamil, not caring for his wife and children, went straight to Haridwar for further advancement in his spiritual life. And Prabhupada makes the point that ISKCON, we now have centers in Vrindavan, Navadvip, and many sacred places, so that retired people, whether they're devotees or not, they can go there and give up the bodily concept. So one can live there for the rest of one's life to achieve perfection by chanting, taking prasad, then go back to Godhead. And Prabhupada says in the purport, we don't have a center in Haridwar. Now, there may well be one now. There may well be. If there isn't, there definitely will be in the near future. But I suspect there is one. But then he goes on to say that actually Vrindavan and Mayapur are better for devotees, even than Haridwar. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the Chaitanya Chandrodaya temple in Mayapur offers one a good opportunity to associate with devotees. Let us all take advantage of this opportunity. Verse 40. In Haridwar, a Jamil took shelter at a Vishnu temple where he executed the process of Bhakti Yoga. He controlled his senses and fully applied his mind in the service of the Lord. And again, another short purport. It is, 3 sentences. The devotees who have joined the Krishna consciousness movement may live comfortably in our many temples and engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Thus they can control the mind and senses and achieve the highest success in life. This is the process descending from time immemorial. Learning from the life of a Jamil, we should vow with determination to do what is necessary to follow this path. 41. A Jamil fully engaged in devotional service. Thus he detached his mind from the process of sense gratification and became fully absorbed in thinking of the form of the Lord. Prabhupada's purport, that we must worship the deity in the temple, and then our minds will be absorbed in thought of him. Because there's no difference between the deity form and the Lord. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga is the easiest form of yoga. The yogis, they mechanically try to focus on the super soul, but we do the same thing by worshipping the deity, and we can see the deity and serve the deity, offer arti and so on. In this way one can progress very naturally and nicely. And in this way, as Bhagavad Gita 6.47 says, one can become the topmost yogi, most intimately united with the Lord in yoga, and the highest of all. So now there's another short section of 3 verses. We'll just read straight through. Verse 42. When his intelligence and mind were fixed upon the form of the Lord, the Brahmana Jamiel once again saw before him 4 celestial persons. He could understand that they were those he had seen previously, and that thus he offered his obeisances by bowing down before them. And another short purport. So many short purports coming. Let me read it. The Vishnu Dutas who had rescued Ajamil came before him again, when his mind was firmly fixed upon the form of the Lord. He hadn't been so firmly fixed. He was, when they were speaking to him, or just at the end of them speaking to him before. The Vishnu Dutas had gone away for some time to give Ajamil a chance to become firmly fixed in meditation upon the Lord. Now that his devotion had matured, they returned to take him back to Godhead. Understanding that the same Vishnu Dutas had returned, Ajamil offered them his obeisances by bowing down before them. 43. Upon seeing the Vishnu Dutas, Ajamil gave up his material body at Haridwar on the bank of the Ganges. He regained his original spiritual body, which was a body appropriate for an associate of the Lord. So we can note, Prabhupada does say that he regained his original spiritual body, not that he just now got a spiritual body. He regained it. So short purport, Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 9, that anyone who understands the nature of the Lord, basically, when he leaves this body, doesn't take birth in this world, but goes to the Lord's eternal abode. Yeah. And Prabhupada repeats that the result of perfection in Krishna consciousness is that after giving up the material body, one goes to the spiritual world in one's original spiritual body. Pretty emphatic, isn't it? And then one becomes an associate of the Lord. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, some devotees go to Vaikuntha Loka and others go to Goloka Vrindavan to become associates of Krishna. 44. Accompanied by the order carriers of Lord Vishnu, Ajamil boarded an airplane made of gold. Passing through the airways, he went directly to the abode of Lord Vishnu, the husband of the goddess of fortune. So in the purport, Prabhupada makes the point that for many years the scientists have tried to go to the moon, but he says they're still unable. But spiritual airplanes, what to speak of going to the moon? They take you back to Godhead in a second. So their speed just can only be imagined, or it can, we can't really imagine it. Because spirit is finer than the mind. And we know how quick the mind is. Here I am here I am in Durban. Now, I'm in Joburg, I'm in Santon. Now I'm in Vrindavan. Now I'm in London in the Radha Gokulananda Temple. Now I'm in New York in the Radha Govinda Temple. That's the speed of the mind. Right, so now the last section, glorification of chanting. So verse 45. Ajamil was a Brahmin who, because of bad association, had given up all Brahminical culture and religious principles. Becoming most fallen, he stole, drank, and performed other abominable acts. He even kept a prostitute. Thus he was destined to be carried away to hell by the order carriers of Yamaraj. But he was immediately rescued simply by a glimpse of the chanting of the holy name Narayan. 46. Therefore, one who desires freedom from material bondage should adopt the process of chanting and glorifying the name, fame, form, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at whose feet all the holy places stand. One cannot derive the proper benefit from other methods, such as pious atonement, speculative knowledge, and meditation and mystic yoga, because even after following such methods, one takes to fruitive activities again, unable to control his mind, which is contaminated by the base qualities of nature, namely passion and ignorance. So Prabhupada makes the point that we have experience of many of these so-called spiritualists, karmis, gyanis, yogis, coming back to material activity again. They say that Jagan Mithya, the world is false, but then they open hospitals and schools. Sometimes they even become politicians, even though they're sannyasis or meant to be. So the conclusion is, to get out of this world we have to do devotional service, which begins with hearing and chanting, and particularly in this age, that's the foundation all the way through, hearing and chanting. And the Krishna consciousness movement has proved this. So many young people addicted to so many wrong things, but now they're engaged in Krishna consciousness through hearing and chanting. Yeah. Because, and Prabhupada refers to Bhagavatam 1.2.19, which makes the point that through the influence of Raja and Tama, a person becomes lusty and greedy more and more. But when they hear and chant, they come to the platform of goodness and become happy. Yes. So as the devotee advances, all his doubts are completely eradicated, and the knot of his desire for fruitive activity is cut to pieces. 47 and 48. Because this very confidential historical narration has the potency to vanquish all sinful reactions. One who hears it or describes it with faith and devotion is no longer doomed to hellish life, regardless of his having a material body, regardless of how sinful he may have been. Indeed, the Yamadutas who carry out the orders of Yamaraj do not approach him even to see him. After giving up his body, he returns home back to Godhead, where he's very respectfully received and worshipped. 49, last verse. While suffering at the time of death, Ajamil chanted the holy name of the Lord. And although the chanting was directed toward his son, he nevertheless returned home back to Godhead. Therefore, if one faithfully and inoffensively chants the holy name of the Lord, where is the doubt that he'll return to Godhead? Yeah, because at the time of death, the body is just becomes chaotic. And even though one may have been chanting for years, under those circumstances, he may not be able to chant nicely, but he still gets the benefit of chanting. So while the body is fit, why should we not chant? And the more we do that, the more possible it is at the time of death we'll be able to properly chant with love. And even if we can't, Prabhupada said Lord Chaitanya will force his way into our minds at the time of death. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in conclusion, one who chants the holy name of the Lord constantly is guaranteed to return home back to Godhead without a doubt. So Prabhupada gives a supplementary note based on Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary to verses 9 and 10 of this chapter. They form a dialogue concerning how one can become free from all sinful reactions simply by chanting the holy names. Prabhupada says, someone may say that by chanting the holy names one becomes free from reactions. But if one does sinful activities in full consciousness many times, he must be unable to free himself, even after lots of atonement. So how is it possible that by once chanting the holy name, one is immediately freed from reactions? This is a good question, isn't it? So the thing is, first of all, verses 9 and 10, I won't read them. You can go back and read them. We already read them. There it said, the Lord says, really, that the chanting of the holy names is the best process of atonement. And if one chants the holy names, even if one's done the most extremely abominable things, still the Lord will think, because this man has chanted my holy name, my duty is to give him protection. That's one thing. But then there's an example given here which we'll mention or refer to by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. We've already discussed that his chanting was not offensive because he was not trying to become free from sinful reactions by calling out the name Narayan. He wasn't glorifying the Lord like consciously. He was calling for his son, but it was just in an innocent, offenseless way. So it wasn't nam aparad. Rather, all his reactions were neutralized. So the explanation is that, so he didn't know he was addicted to sin and didn't know chanting would neutralize his sin. Thus he didn't do nama parad, and his repeated chanting of his son's name can be called pure chanting. In this way he unconsciously accumulated the results of bhakti. So therefore even his first chanting was sufficient to nullify all reactions of his life. And the example is given of a tree, a fig tree, or sort of any tree really, doesn't immediately produce fruit, but in time fruit comes. So similarly, Ajamil's devotional service grew little by little, and although he did many sins, the reactions didn't affect him. Because Shastra says, if one chants the holy name even once, the reactions of past, present, and future sins do not affect him. And another example is given. If one takes out the poisonous fangs of a snake, then if he bites in the future, it'll have no effect, even if he bites repeatedly. Similarly, if a devotee chants the holy name even once, offenselessly, this protects him eternally. He only has to wait for the results to mature in due course of time. Same idea as the tree producing fruit. It's just a matter of time. Once the seed has been sown and the tree starts to grow, it's not a question, will there be fruit? Maybe, maybe not. there will be in due course. Yeah, if one starts chanting, then you've planted the seed, the process has started. It's just a question of time. Even if the process is interrupted, if a person falls down for some time, sooner or later they'll come back and carry on. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.